Fuck! Where the fuck am I? What the fuck? What?
Oh hey Riser, what are you doing here?
Cloudy? Wait, why are you here? And where is here?
Psh, oh no. This is just a dream. Have you heard about this totally awesome webcomic?
I'm gonna take a shot in the dark and say the comic you're talking about is Anarchy Dreamers, right?
What? What would possibly give you that idea?
Let's just say I have an eye for subtlety.
Glad you can see it my way. Happy editing.
Oh, what the... I just had another one of those dreams where I dreamt of Cloudy. Oh, I gotta stop doing that. People might start writing fan fiction again. What the fuck? Doing stories of paranormal stuff in this day and age is not an easy thing to do. It was easier back when not everyone was walking around with a camera in their pocket that could record full feature film length Ultra HD videos and talk with everyone everywhere at any time. Superman wouldn't be able to simply transform inside a phone booth in this day and age, mostly because no one fucking uses phone booths anymore, but also because everyone and their mother would be ready to record him or call someone up and tell them what they saw. Yo, dude, you're never going to guess what I just saw, right? Okay, so I'm walking down the street, right, doing my thing, and then suddenly I see this motherfucker, he walks into a phone booth. I know, right? Like, who the fuck ever goes into a phone booth? What even is a phone booth now, right? Yeah, okay, so he goes in there and he takes off his glasses and motherfucker, it's Superman! Yeah, he just goes into this thing and then it's like, he must have been super fucked up that he found the phone booth, cause like the motherfucker, he wore his underpants on the outside. Hold on, I'm gonna send you a fucking video, hold on. Yeah. What the fuck you mean he always does that? A thing I've discussed with a lot of people is how to properly implement paranormal stuff in a normal world. Or implement even more paranormal stuff into an already paranormal world. It's not easy. The trap many people fall into is that they forget the world we are taking part of has existed long before we are first introduced to it. So if, say, thousands of people just appear and have superpowers and have been in an all-out war with someone for years, and we have first-hand seen how big these fights tend to be, how come no one has mentioned them? How come they are still secret to the public? You would be surprised by how many comics I've looked at where the premise is that there's demons in the real world and people are banding together to stop them because they're killing people by the truckloads. And many times when I've asked, well, why doesn't the public at large know about this? The creators have either been saying that they've just stayed hidden, or straight up they didn't really think about it. And if they say stayed hidden, the next question is, how? Cause like we stated before, with technology as it is today and how much everyone everywhere is under constant surveillance, you can't even tickle your dick without someone knowing it. Men in Black and Bleach had devices that straight up made people forget what they had seen, which I suppose it's fine. But that's until you have giant, huge scale public destruction. You can't really forget something you're staring directly at. Today's comic is a comic I personally feel tackles the entire theme pretty well, and it does so by, well, giving us a world in which everyone almost has superpowers. But it also goes further and talks about how the world at large reacts to these superpowers. How the state deals with it, the laws and law enforcement, the mindset of the people not having superpowers, and so on. It does what paranormal should be treated as, which is treating the paranormal as a part of the world and not just a single entity, a thing you're not supposed to question, like Digit and the nanocells in Les Lindas. Here, nanocells just exist as a paranormal thing in this world, and we are not allowed to ask about the various rules and restrictions these things have, otherwise the law just falls on its ass. Who owns nanocells? Why do they own them? What can it do? How do they work? How don't they work? What's their modems function? Asking shit like this just destroys everything, and they're not even questions you have to think long and hard to ask, but I actually even think that the comic itself touches upon very loosely. Fuck. Another Les Lindas reference. Oh well. Reset the clock! Today we are reviewing a comic known as Anarchy Dreamers, made by Emily Ree, and can we just start off with saying how much I love that name? It's short, it's memorable, it rolls off the tongue. Before we get into the actual review though, I believe there's something that needs to be stressed, because unlike other self-proclaimed reviewers, I want to be transparent and have you guys know what's what and who's who. Yes, I picked up this comic because my friend Cloudy Days wouldn't stop pushing it. And I also did a thing which many of you might be shocked by, and actually backed this comic up on Kickstarter to get a physical copy out. I know, right? I never back up comics. I only shit on them. I would never dream about supporting a comic or the creators' hard work, bitch. But yeah, it's not like this fact is gonna change my thoughts about this comic or anything in any way, but I just figured I'd let everything out in the open rather than failing to mentioning something and then end up on, I don't know, drama alert cause Keemstar thinks he's exposing me. Is Keemstar even still a thing? But yeah, I threw some money in this comic's direction, and believe it or not, I hadn't actually read the comic prior to doing that. I just liked the art style and I figured if I could help I would. So imagine my surprise when I found out that what I had bagged was actually pretty freaking good. Not without faults, like at all, but really good. Now, I gotta be honest here. When you first sit down with Anarchy Dreamers, you'll be confused, and you'll be very confused. Emily doesn't just give you the answers you want then and there. She hints at the things, she talks around the subjects, and lets you fill in the holes. Nowhere will you find a better example of this than on the very first page, where you see a bunch of stuff scattered out on the table. You got a pen, a book, a magazine and a tablet, and you'll immediately find your eye drawn to the tablet, but find that most of it is cut off. You'll then look to the book and see the mentioning of Dreamwalkers, and then you have the magazine underneath that exists. Actually, this tells us something too, but let's start out with the tablet. The tablet tells us that an incident happened 5 months ago. The reader is immediately interested in what event happened. And when we read the words such as resurrection thrown in there all casual like, you are immediately aware that this is a paranormal world. The tablet also gives us a small character introduction in the form of a picture giving us names of the ones included. Looking at the book, we see the word Dreamwalker, and it even mentions abilities. We thus realize that these Dreamwalkers have abilities, and we also find out that Dreamwalkers can have visual alterations such as horns, tails and teeth, that they have memory loss, and that they need to steer clear of things known as nightmares. And last but not least, the magazine underneath the book tells us this is taking place in April. This is super good. I've said it before and I say it again. I don't even think there's an exception to the rule, and thus it is my most important rule when it comes to anything visually story related. Show, don't tell. Now, with the swear words and dick jokes I make in this show, I'm going to hope most of the people watching it are at least, I don't know, 14 and up. And I think we can all agree that when it comes to stories, you've long since outgrown your need for hand-holding. You don't need to be told, this is your hero, or this guy is evil, or this is important. Thus, if you are a writer and these are the people you're catering to, there's no need for going out of your way to drill information into your readers' brains. Anarchy Dreamers, God I love that name so much, does more here than I think most people realize. It's a page that is flooding with information if you just sit down and look at it. Plus, it is conveyed in a nice and different way. It's not like these characters aren't showcased later, and it's not like the whole Dreamwalker and abilities thing isn't expanded on later, but it starts out with laying some foundation. If you immediately started talking about abilities and how kids are throwing straight Hadoukens at each other, and then explain who they are, what the rules are and shit like that, you got no foundation and the thing will topple over. If you want an example of this, look no further than the last comic we reviewed, Diesel, in which the stands are pulled out with no explanation, no rules, no setup, no nothing. They're there and that's all we know. Setting the foundation for the information you're going to convey to your readers is super important. For example, there's a reason why you pick bread as the bottom of your sandwich. It's the foundation that holds it all up. The comic starts out at the annual St. Dorcas Day family night, and maybe it's just me, but I am just loving how this is the perfect way of introducing us, as well as the parents, to the world this is taking place in. This way, the parents are getting the information conveyed to them, as is why they are here, and we, the readers, tag along, getting the information at the same time as the parents do. See, this is how simple it can be to convey your information in a realistic way. No one enjoys the entire story to come to a halt because a guy has to explain to himself how exactly the world around him works. Why would he do that? He knows how the world works, he grew up in it. He doesn't know what he's interacting with is alien to the reader. Anyway, moving on from the strawman I just created with no clear reference to whatsoever, we move back to the St. Dorcas Day family night at the Sacred Heart High. Here we are being introduced to further details about the Dreamwalkers. Basically, an event happened, the same event mentioned in the tablet where a bunch of kids died, but all the kids came back as Dreamwalkers. It turns out that in this universe, if you are below a certain age and you die, there's a chance you come back as a Dreamwalker, a person with superhuman abilities. However, it's what comes next that I truly adored. The mic is given to Captain O'Neill from the New York State Dreamwalker Guard, and I already was celebrating. Thank you. Of course, if it's well established that there are people with superhuman abilities, then there should be a guard to keep them under control. That's obvious. These are kids like any other kids, only they're kids with super abilities, so of course they're inclined to be assholes and needs to be kept in check. You don't think a bully victim who's been pushed to his limits, if you gave him the power to set people on fire, he wouldn't do that to the people bullying him? See, think about what super abilities does to your world and how the world would then shape around it. Don't just digit it and hope it works out. Cause it doesn't. It gets even better when O'Neill explains that with the increasing dreamer population, nightmare activity has also increased exponentially. And then she says what should kinda hint you in on what the incident that happened is. This is to be expected amongst adolescents in the months following a tragedy. The word tragedy is what got my alarm bells to ring, and I'm not gonna tell you what it is cause it's interesting in itself to figure it out. but I like how it's not given any special attention. It's not glorified, it's not made cool, and it's not covered in any specific way. There's no doubt it's a super dramatic and horrible thing, and the characters refer to it as such, but it's not shown and made cool. Anyway, O'Neill is explaining how nightmares are created from pent-up stress, anger, and anxiety, looking for an outlet, and then she says the thing that got me hooked with the comic. However disturbing they may be, confronting nightmares cannot be tolerated. Okay, so you guys know how I love manga and anime. Despite 90% of modern anime is like a literal dumpster fire. I love it for the visuals, the action, and the sometimes rather deep narratives that are going on behind the scenes. However, as much as I love anime and manga, there's a certain trope that has since the get-go annoyed the shit out of me, which is the institution uses young kid to fight X. No. Fuck off. Why? Why are the fully grown people looking at a 15-year-old boy, giving him a sword and or gun, and then tell him go murder the fuck out of people? Like, this is one of the main issues with Naruto. There's a school of which it's the greatest honor among families to have children go to, in which they learn to do techniques that are specifically used for taking another person's life. Fuck, it's often even in hand-to-hand combat.
Ah, Miss Kusanagi, welcome. As you can see here, I have Daisuke's report card here, and as you can see, he is acing every class. However, he is failing his Mortal Kombat Finishers class. That simply won't do. Not for a young aspiring ninja.
I don't understand. We have told him ever since he first learned how to walk how important it is to finish off his opponents.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Miss Kusanagi. Cause if you would look at this report card here, Daisuke's classmate Ryu doesn't just ace his Mortal Kombat finishers, he has also developed his own signature move in which he rips off his opponent's arms and ass rapes him with them.
Holy shit.
Now, I'm not an idiot. I'm an idiot, but I do have some common sense left in me. I know that the reason why the heroes in these comics are kids is to make it more relatable to the readers of the comic, but that doesn't justify why kids should be in this position. Unless it's like Evangelion where you have to have Shinji get in the fucking robot because of reasons, then fine. Heck, that comic, as much as I don't really like it, is a deconstruction of the whole kid getting into a super robot trope. And it actually talks about how being in this position influences Shinji and how much he wants to not do it. What I'm getting at is, unless there's a good reason for you to use kids as fucking soldiers for hire, you should not have it in there. And that is why I love this part of Anarchy Dreamers so much. Even if you have superpowers, fighting demons and shit is illegal. You may have superpowers, but fuck you, you're still a kid. You shouldn't be putting yourself in life and death scenarios, and especially not on someone's payroll. To me, this screams that Emily has thought about this more than not at all. We even find out that not only is there a police enforcement specifically for dreamers and nightmares, no, there's even people stationed at schools to take care of the problems, which makes sense seeing, as we covered before, dreamers are only manifested in young people. There's constantly this process of, okay, you got this fact, what does that lead to? Like, okay, dreamers can only be kids, which then leads to, then schools should be supervised by people keeping dreamers under control, seeing kids are more emotional. With every fact about the comic's lore comes an action taken by the world. Anyway, now that I've gotten the introduction speech out of the way, we can for realsies get into the comic. You probably already guessed what the plot is from what I've been talking about, but basically in this world when kids die, there's a chance they come back with a dreamer power. Now, there are more things that leads into this, but that's the gist of it. Anyway, along with these dreamers comes nightmares, which are basically monsters, and this is where we meet the stars of the comic, one being our main protagonist Tabby, and the super lovable Koji, who are out defeating nightmares. And yes, they're doing so in secret, cause need I remind you, doing this shit is illegal. Along with them, they have Tadg, Cecilia, Devlin, and Crow, and thus the scene is set for a team to go out and vanquish the nightmares of their classmates. However, certain things happen and they quickly find out that maybe they can't just settle with helping their classmates, and soon they have to protect far more people from far bigger dangers. Basically, it's a story you've heard a million times before. Kids with superpowers have to team up to fight evil. Only what makes this so much different and, in my opinion, more interesting is the setting. We've seen this story a million times before, and I know you have to review things in a vacuum, but you also gotta remember tropes and creativity. And while this may sound like I'm revving up for a rant, I'm actually not. Cause like I've said before, you can have two identical stories, yet told in different ways and with different focuses, and you'll come out loving one way more than the other. The example I've used before is 50 Shades of Grey and Sunstone. Same core concept, yet the focus is somewhere else entirely. And one of them seems to know what it's actually talking about, while the other is just house mom porn. Anyway, that separates Anarchy Dreamers from its peers is that it has a different approach to it all. There's a great sense of mystery and a lot of things that don't sit right with the readers almost from the get-go, and it feels intentional. Like calling honey honey instead of bee goop. It's to the point where Cecilia doesn't seem to know what honey is, and Tabby is several times caught exclaiming how weird this world's food is. Which is weird because it's stated that this is New York. There's also a bunch of things going on behind the scene, with everything from the Dream God keeping a watch on the heroes to some evil force that's not immediately showcased wanting to do something, and even how our heroes' powers seem to evolve. But definitely, the thing that set this comic story apart from its peers is where the focus lies. It lies with the kids and how they deal with their power and what comes with it. It's so interesting to see how society is tackling these things and even how the kids are dealing with it. There's something oddly interesting in seeing how a world is working where superpowers are pretty normal. So at this point in time, I'd say I'm actually more interested in the comic for its whole mystery and how the world is built up than the action and drama. Unfortunately, this is where we get into the not so great things about this comic. While I do love how long Emily is able to drag the tension and mystery, and with how she manages to make it so you're constantly interested and invested in it, there's an issue here that needs to be tackled. And it needs to be tackled hard. Like we're talking a real American football tackle here. The pacing of this comic needs to be dealt with. Now, normally it's fine because it's energetic and does its moving pretty fast, and you know, with a comic with this much life, that's fine. However, when your characters have just escaped a battle in which most of them were on the verge of dying, and they then, on the very same page, start worrying about their job? No, that's not how you do it. No! Now, from what I've been told, much of the pacing problems originates from the comic being made as a comic issue you can find at your local gas station. Or wherever the heck you buy comics. Where I came from, we used to do it in gas stations, but that's beside the point. It's made to work like that, and for all intents and purposes, it does so pretty well. But sometimes the comic is going a little too fast, and sometimes it's going way too fast. We'll be talking about it more later, but the art of this comic, stylish as it is sometimes a little too stylish for its own good, and makes it hard for the readers to make out what is happening. And when the comic is in such a rush to move forward, it doesn't really help, and you're being yanked away from a moment instead of being properly shown what's going on. And in a comic where powers and nightmares can be literally anything, we need to know what's going on to understand the peril. The first real battle the team has moves along so fast that I didn't at any point get the idea of how important and dangerous it was. Subtlety, I find, often goes hand in hand with a good pacing. Subtle horror, for example, can only really be done if the horror movie slowly eases you into the horror feeling rather than a bad teenager slasher flick where it's like blah, blood, splat, titties of this somewhat known movie star, spooky jumpscares, wah! There's a reason why you find good subtlety mostly in media that moves slow, like Paranormal Activity, Dark Souls, Silent Hill 2 and 3, and even a murder mystery book or movie. And I know some idiot out there is going to say that, well, it's a story, just don't read it so fast. And while sure you can just not read it so fast, it ruins the pace that Emily created in the first place. Establishing a pace is a hard thing to do when it comes to writing and goes hand in hand with conveyance. You can't ask people to read slower just to make people slow the fuck down, so you have to do it so through the way you convey information. With Anarchy Dreamers it moves very fast, and it's mostly due to every frame being essential. There's not a single frame wasted to drive the comic forward. There's very little in terms of establishing shots, plus most information is being talked about while something else is going on. To better show what I mean when it comes to pacing, if you got both subject A and subject B being talked about and dealt with at the same scene, you're moving twice as fast as if you dealt with subject A and subject B independently.
Now, don't get me wrong. Few people enjoy a fast pace as much as me, but you also have to slow down sometimes.
Pacing is a perfect way to help your reader get into the feel of the scene of the comic. Action scenes are usually without a lot of words because the more time a reader uses on reading the words, the longer time the reader spends on that frame, and the slower the scene will appear. You might remember this is something I complained about in my Incarnate review when no one shuts the fuck up during a fight. One Punch Man, which yes we will be covering that soon, is fantastic in terms of pacing if you read the manga. I mean, almost an entire chapter is spent on the descent of a robot. It's important for you as a reader to soak in every little thing about this robot, so the subject matter is being stretched out on several pages. With that said, pacing can also be way too slow. If it's moving too slow, you'll be sitting there yanking at your hair if you have any and going, "We get it, just let's just fucking go!" This is typically achieved mostly unintentionally by clogging up every frame with text. Again, the rule of thumb is the longer time you spend on reading each individual page, the slower the pace will as a result seem. And long story short, that is one of my biggest gripes with this comic. When the art is as psychedelic as it is, and when so much of this comic is going on at once, sometimes it's nice to just slow down and take a breath and go, okay, where are we? Who's who? What's what? And who knows, maybe it's something that'll be worked on in the future. The comic is still pretty new, and hey, creators of these comics have taken my suggestions before, so who knows?
Oh yeah, House Pets fans, how do you like your new site layout and updated archive? Obviously I can't take all the credit, but funny how that got changed after I complained about it, It's almost like you can still give someone a listen even if they swear a lot or go against what you like. Huh. I mean, okay, this is a thing, but seriously? You're not gonna listen to me just cause I swear a lot? Welcome to the fucking real world, fuckface! Well, fuck.
There's one word that describes this comic far better than any word, and it's stylish. This comic is oozing with style. The colors are bright and flashy, the characters are cool and unique, the nightmares are in complete different art style, and even the freaking voice bubbles and picture frames are all unique and different.
There's something to be said about comics that implements creativity into all of its components, and that is, I love you!
Anarchy Dreamers most definitely stands out from any other webcomic with its insanely colorful style and minimalistic yet super stylish art style. I mean, one look at pretty much any random page of this comic should give you a good idea of just how bright and colorful the whole thing is. The art style actually reminds me somewhat of what you'll find in, say, Samurai Jack or Dexter's Laboratory. Pretty much everything is super pointy, and for all intents and purposes, it works.
I know it's not exactly everyone's cup of tea, but if you want to impress me of all people, having a personal art style is the way to go.
Another compliment in the comics art department is most definitely how Emily conveys stuff through the picture in the frames. Besides every frame being unique and colorful, most of the frames also convey stuff with how, say, the fictional camera is pointed. One that kinda stood out to me is when Cecilia wanted to talk with the gang and Emily somehow manages to make a fluid transition from one frame to the next. I know some of you are going, the fuck is he talking about? But you know those scenes in movies where someone is in one scene being talked to and the person who's talking to the person is slowly being drowned out, then suddenly someone calls that person out, the person snaps out of it, and it's suddenly a completely different scene? Yeah, that's a fluent transition, in which two scenes kinda phase into one another. I can't really tell you what it does in terms of conveyance, but it just shows me Emily fought long and hard before putting these things down on paper. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Readers will pick up on it if you half-ass something. We will, however, also pick up on something if you put extra effort into it. While Anarchy Dreamers has an incredibly simple art style, one cannot take away all the details that are there if you stop up and look. Frames such as this here on page 23 where you see Tabby from the side and you can actually see the magical eye shining through the eye patch. Stuff like that are littered out throughout the comic and it makes pages that were already a treat to look at tons of fun to just stare at and spot new things with all the time. Heck, I got half a mind to cut up my version of Anarchy Dreamers and then just put it up on a wall like I did with my Gurren Lagann wall. One last compliment I gotta give this comic before we start getting into some of the bad stuff is just how insanely creative everything looks. While yes, the TV for a head isn't exactly something you haven't seen before if you've seen Fooly Cooly, here it's being done much different and in a very creative fashion. If the initial reading of the comic isn't enough to get you hooked, these 2 pages where Tabby dreams of 2 people with TV heads should do the trick. The sushi has these weird colors, the text is written backwards, the last frame is clearly getting eaten by something, but my favorite, and this might have passed you by, is what is on the screens of the 2 TVs. The orange TV, who I assume is Koji, is showing what I assume is the no signal colors, which are universally known for when something is not receiving something. In TV cases, a TV signal. This wouldn't be nearly as interesting and straight up alarming if it wasn't because that the pink TV, which I assume is Tabby, has a crack in it. Not just any crack. It's a hole and it's weirdly in the upper right of the screen. What else is broken in the upper right of something? Even if I'm wrong and this got nothing to do with anything, the mere fact that it is made in such a way that I can, let alone want to, analyze it like this is a huge testament to how good this art is. But everything must come to an end. And as much as I would love to just sing this comic's art high praises, we all know that there's an elephant in the room who needs to get body tackled. I said it before, but it bears repeating cause it is the comic's biggest flaw. There's nothing wrong with something being stylish. In fact, I've spent the last couple of minutes complimenting and praising that to the skies. But there's doing it too much too. This is one of such cases. The comic can be too stylish for its own good. Without exaggeration, when reading the part where the team gets drawn into a nightmare world, I completely lost track of what was going on, simply cause the art style was so confusing. I mean, looking at this page here, unless you are actively looking for it, where does, say, a skeleton horse appear? I get that making things hard to comprehend and see is a great way to establish panic, but I kinda feel like it went overboard here. We're also shown a few cases in the earlier strips where stuff is simply not shown, like this one here. Tabby is apparently hurt, but all we have to show for it is her dripping rainbow colored goo from a cheek. A cheek that, while it was bruised earlier, didn't exactly bleed. And unfortunately, there's more like this throughout the comic. It seems a little too set in ways to be mysterious to the point of it not showing stuff that doesn't have to be mysterious. Like, Tabby is here supposed to cut the Nightmare's newspaper, but frankly, you don't get that idea at all. Or later, where Koji time stops Tabby into existence, there's not shown a frame of her not being there before her suddenly being there. So we don't get a feeling of her just popping into existence as much as she could just walk up to them. Sure, we get sparkly glitter around her, but that might as well be due to the comedic effect, and while I don't necessarily need to be shown that every time it happens, It's kinda crucial at the beginning where we are still establishing powers and characters. While it's not as bad as the comparison I'm about to make, it's still the same problem. Emily is an amazing artist, but like Cello, being a good artist doesn't make you a good comic artist. She's not as bad as Cello by any stretch of the imagination, but she still needs to work on presenting stuff. All in all, Anarchy Dreamer's art is fantastic, and I can promise you the moment I get the chance I'm buying a poster of it to hang somewhere in my apartment. It's unique, it's different and super colorful. It does have some serious flaws in the department of presenting stuff, but ultimately it's overshadowed by how unique and interesting it is. There's so much time and care put into every page. I mean, shit, I haven't even told you that if you hover your mouse over a page, small little Easter eggs pop forth. If that doesn't show care and love for your project, I don't know what the fuck does. Holy fuck, I've gone on a long time here. Okay, so let's start out with everyone's spunky little ball of energy, Tabby O'Malley. Now, I'm gonna be real with you. I hate the cutesy character type. They're pretty much all up there with the tsundere characters. I hate them. I fucking hate them. When I saw Nanako in Persona 4, the first thing I wanted to do was dropkick her off a mountain, but then she does this.
Every day's great at your tuneness. Every day's great at your tuneness.
And I was like, oh my sweet precious little summer child, I love you! But yeah, I hate the cutesy character with only two exceptions. So when Tabby here, which I constantly keep spelling with a fucking Y instead of an I, started displaying those cutesy traits, I immediately became wary and had my guard up. But lo and behold, Tabby does the balancing act perfectly and doesn't become this obnoxious ball of duh. But there's ever so much more. While she doesn't just seem like a soft little happy-go-lucky girl, Tabby has a rougher edge to her as well. She's not afraid of cussing or put people in their place or tell people off. In fact, she's pretty lovable. She's not an archetype as she's a good character with layers of personality. We still need to see more of her, but when we've already seen her being happy, awkward, energetic, but at the same time seen her be crude, jealous and even a little vindictive, it immediately shows me that this character is more than what she first appears as. Did I also mention that she has the power to summon cutlery and other stuff from her body? Yeah, that's pretty fucking rad. Next up is the Asian Dreamboat, better known as Koji Takahashi. Besides being the most handsome fucker in the entire comic, he also has the best power by a factor of 1,000,000 in that it has the greatest villain of all time Dio's powers. Which allows him to stop time at the cost of him being nauseous afterwards. Koji to me seems to be a kinda happy-go-lucky guy, if not a little oblivious to what is going on around him. But there's no doubt he means well, and I just have to say I love Emily's way of depicting Koji when he's stopping time, both with the digital numbers counting the seconds, but also the after images that he creates. It looks dope as all hell. Unfortunately, that's all I have to say about Koji. As she's called, kinda feels like she's flip-flopping around between being a good guy and a bad guy. If that's intentional, then kudos. If not, well, not kudos. Anyway, she seems kinda sketchy right from the get-go and seems to know more than what she lets on. Guess we'll have to see if it's intentional or not. Need I remind you that this comic just barely crossed my 100 pages entry level, so it's kinda limited on what I have to go on. Tadg O'Malley. Tadg? Tag? How the fuck do you pronounce... what? How the fuck does that become Tag? Anyway, Tag here's power is healing and he seems to have a thing for punk rock. He is Tabby's brother and seems to be the voice of reason within the group. Sometimes, however, that feels more like the voice of a reluctance than reason, but who can blame the guy when he's the one who has to patch everyone up? I don't know if it's just me, but I don't really remember seeing the guy use any sort of power besides sparkling after taking a tombstone to the face. Maybe his power is that he's super good at remembering first aid kits whenever he goes. You might think that's a super dumb and silly power to have, but read JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and then get back to me on that one. Devlin Olsen gets my new and exciting waifu stamp. Devlin is this fiery character with an attitude problem, and that seems to go hand in hand with her ability to conjure fire from her own body. Just like fire, she seems to have no shortage of energy, yet is for the most time a calm little ember until you piss her off and she becomes a fire tornado.
Holy shit!
I hope you're starting to see a tragic trend with these characters. I don't enjoy it any more than you. Last up, we got David Anthony Palatucci, or as he likes to be called, Crow. Crow reminds me of Pyro from X-Men in that he just barely comes up short of having an omnipotent power in that he can't create electricity, he can just control it. And while that may be kind of a bummer, I love how Emily and in such Crow gets around that by him tapping power from the one thing teenagers always carrying around, his cell phone. And not only that, he uses his crutches as a kind of gun to discharge the electricity in the form of shots. I love that, it's creative yet it makes sense. Oh, that and he's gay. Not sure how it's important, but I know some people will have my head if I don't point that out. And that's all the protagonists. Does it seem like anything is missing? I'll give you a hint. There is. Yep, and really this might as well be because there's only a little over 100 pages out there, but thus far, these characters aren't very deep. Besides Tabby and Cecilia, the rest of the characters seem kinda one-dimensional. Now again, it is a fair defense that saying it's simply because the comic isn't longer than it is at this point in time, but I also need to point out that other comics have established way deeper characters in a shorter span of time. I kinda maybe think this is due to the pacing thing I was talking about earlier. The comic is too much in a rush to go from one point to the next that it doesn't let the characters be themselves and flesh themselves out to the readers. Again, maybe it's intentional, maybe there's more on the way, who knows? But as it is now, it's a complaint and I have to bring it up. Your characters are good, Emily. Do dare to show them off. The writing is a 7. This is a great story with ton of potential. There's some mistakes and shortcomings here and there, but in total it's a blast to read. The art is a 7 as well. It's this close to being an 8 simply because of how unique, creative and colorful the art is. Had it just been a gallery of pictures, that's what I'd have given it. But because it does have these issues in terms of presenting stuff, it just barely falls short. The characters are a 5. They're good, but they need to be fleshed out more. Really, it can go both ways with these characters simply not having more to offer, or we haven't scratched the surface yet. We'll have to see. All in all, the reading experience of this comic is a 7. I'm super happy I initially threw some money in this comic's Kickstarter, despite not knowing what it was. And I'm even more happy that my friend Cloudy didn't stop pushing it to me. It's this little bomb of potential and I so hope it blows up. If you got even the slightest interest in superpowers, don't pass this comic up. Anarchy Dreamers is a comic that dares to be its own little beast, and I can't stress enough how much I implore people to learn from that. I'll see you guys in the next webcomic Belief. Take care.
I am power. Whenever see me coming, I'ma break the chain. I am power. You ain't gonna break me. I'ma break the game. I am power. I am ruthless. I am fire. You ain't gonna break me. I'ma break the game. I am power. No barriers. You wanna bring me down? I'll break your face. I'll leave you in disgrace. Give me a reason to make a man, so I send it to the motherfucker bottom again. Yeah. I am power. I am ruthless. I am fire.
This video has been a long time coming, and I am so sorry that it took so long. There's been a bunch of meetings, a bunch of work and other stuff that has simply just, halted the process of making this video. So I'm really happy that you stuck with it and you got to see it now. This episode has been sponsored by a bunch of amazing people. There's a lot to talk about, so let's just get in with it. First of all, we got Amosin, a newcomer to the show, which is making a webcomic known as Druids. It is a sexy fantasy comic in the World of Warcraft universe, specifically centered around druids. If that's your thing, go check it out. Next up, we got Kathy Catlin. Kathy doesn't want me to push anything just yet, but trust me when I say that there is some good stuff coming to you. Loriel-kun, my man Justin, is working on Yav, an adult furry comic about romance, sex and all that good stuff. Go check it out. Hitori the artist. Hitori makes streams every Sunday where you can go and give your personal feedback to the person's art style. They would love to get better, and the only way they can do that is by feedback from you guys. So please go and give your 2 cents. Soulblader. Soulblader is working on Tears of the Fallen, which is a webcomic that is very similar to a Shonen Jump action comic from the sounds of it. It's going to be amazing once it comes out. Alex J. Alex J is working on Death's My Bitch, a death in the workplace webcomic slice of life comic. It's really interesting, go check it out. Shane Asher. Shane Asher is working on Strays of Seraria, a furry superhero comic. Here, super abilities may not be illegal, but it's still really interesting. Jake. Jake is working on the webcomic known as The Drifter. It's a very mature Anthro comic that I strongly suggest that you go and give a look. Angel Povedano Ruiz. Angel is working on a webcomic known as Destined Flames, which is an action fantasy comic. Go check it out because there's some pretty interesting stuff here. Olivier Latsky. Olivier is pushing a webcomic known as Jandora, and guys, trust me, when you see this thing, you will fall in love at first sight. The art style and the visuals are just spectacular. Musashden. Musashden is working on a webcomic known as Illegal Tenders, with bartenders with super abilities in a world where it's illegal. If Anarchy Dreamers is your thing, this might just be too. Agent Cheshire. Agent Cheshire is working on making commissions, so if you want some good art done, by all means, go throw them a comment or a mail or whatever. You can look at the screen and see something that I personally got done. Achromatic. Achromatic is making a mature Pac-Man comic known as, well, Pac-Man. Go check it out if you want a different spin on something that shouldn't be this interesting. Ray. Ray is working on DNA, a comic that both me and my girlfriend have been following with a strong passion simply because of how interesting and unique it is. Go check it out. Next up is Shiv. Shiv is working on a webcomic known as Key to My Heart, which is a series about CJ the cat and Shiv the Toon Chimera as they discover what it's like to be roommates, and as CJ tries to win Shiv's heart. Scott Fraser. Scott Fraser is working on a very lovely webcomic known as Star Warriors, which is a fantasy action comic that I strongly suggest that you go check out. Nights to Dreams. Nights to Dreams is working on a webcomic known as Fractures, which is about a young fox boy named Delarin trying to take care of his closest friend Talaris, a ghostly creature simply known as a tethered soul. It's about what comes at the end of a journey and whether or not it will be worth it. Nick Nocturne. This is coming out at the end of October, but if you want your Halloween spooks going on, Nick Nocturne is your guy with Nightmine. Go check it out if you want anything of the horror sort. And last but not least, we got Classic, Henry Volt, Arno Smed, Drika of Adrian, Insane Ukulele, Darkspeeds, Nicholas Knudsen, Jay Lee, Alistair Vane, Brittany Williamson, Kawhi Lee, Ghostlight Studios, Lizzie Shiro, Gage, Zachary Seligson, Dylan Schultz, Shannon TJ, and Vivid Publishing. If you want to support the show with some money every now and then, every time that I upload a video, you can do so on Patreon. Just go to www.patreon.com/Riser with 2 eyes. You can pledge any amount of money that you want every time that I upload a video, and it's all up to you. If you want to support me with a bunch of money, you will give behind the scenes footage and commentary tracks and all that good stuff. And if you don't want any of that and just want to throw like $1 or a cent or whatever the heck you want in my way, everything is appreciated. The webcomic relief will continue nevertheless, but everything helps to make more improvements to the show, such as this one. If you don't want to support the show with pledging some money on Patreon, you can do so by either liking the video, sharing the video, or subscribing to the channel so you can see whenever I upload more dumb stuff. And if you're not interested in any of that, well, at least thank you for watching the video till the end. And hopefully I'll see you again next time in the next webcomic relief. Take care.